Welcome everyone to Through the Void Gate, a Warcaster podcast for new and experienced players. Deploying in 3.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Through the Void Gate. This is our final Kickstarter mini episode. Tonight we will be covering Marcher Worlds, which is my bae. They got some super cool things in this Kickstarter, and they look amazing. So to start running down what they are, I'll pass you over to Justin.
Howdy, yeah. So, as we all know, the cadres are 2 squads, a solo, usually an attachment. Imperians are the exception to that. They don't have any attachments for their squads. And a champion model. So, March Worlds is no exception in that area. They are the Dragoon Air Cavalry cadre. The first squad we'll talk about is the Dragoon Strike Team. They're DC 2, Speed 7, Map 4, Rat 3, Defense 3, Armor 3. Put a little asterisk by that defense number. They're a 3-man squad on 30mm bases with flight. They have their charge is Reflect Accelerator. When this model makes its attacks during its activation while it's charged, it can attack with all of its weapons. I believe this is the same charge as on the Paladin Commander, right?
And Enforcers, yeah.
So just a good one to have. It doubles your attack just for having Arc on, so that's awesome. And their spike is Sequence Dominator. This squad can spike to use Sequence Dominator at any time during its activation. For the rest of this activation, when a model in this squad hits one or more enemy models in an attack, one model in this squad can move up to 2 inches. It's an interesting little spike, because generally squads lose a lot of effectiveness once they've lost their arc. But it does potentially give them a lot of really strange movement that you can do. Yeah, so you could, if you do happen to spike them early and hit with all 3 attacks, any number of your members in your squad could move 2 to 6 inches. So you could snake one guy really far away from the group, or you could snake all of them apart from each other if blast is a concern. There's a lot of things you can do, but it's not super accurate once you spike them, because they each also drop an attack. So it's an interesting spike. I don't know sure how much I love it.
Yes, but to be clear for everybody, they don't move together like a normal squad, right? One guy just gets to move away.
Right. It's more like the Raker, where like he does his spike to move himself. In this situation, says when a model hits one or more enemy models and attack, one model in the squad can move up.
Yeah.
And rules that kind of call out one model moving like that only affect that model. That's why when the Raker moves for its Phase Talker ability, the rest of the squad doesn't bounce with him.
Yeah. Well, it could be up to 8 inches with the attachment.
That's fair.
And,
yeah. I didn't bring up the attachment.
And like they could potentially go 8 inches and then move their 7 for 15, plus another 3.2 from placing the other people. So they could potentially have an 18.2 inch range of movement, which is kind of crazy, which is the highest in the game outside of an Ascension Catalyst Nemesis, right?
I'm trying to think. Probably. You're probably right, because the Angels and Empyreans only get 10.5 and 6.5, so they get 17.
Mm-hmm.
Although theirs they just get for spiking. These guys have to hit with Rat 3 or Map 4 with no charge on them in order to make it work.
Right. But
So I think realistically you're happy if you get 4 inches out of this, and I don't think you ever expect more than
yeah,
No, I think it's like a utility piece. Like you use it if you absolutely need it to get onto a point, or you spike on your very last guy to really get, like, if you need to get that arc off. But outside of those 2 specific scenarios, off the top of my head, I can't really think of like a must-use scenario for that outside of getting to a point you have to contest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
But
I'm kind of the same boat. I'm not super thrilled about this spike, and it kind of frustrates me a little bit too, because with Marcher Worlds, all the other squads have Slip Displacer, so your flying squad is on average much slower than your other squads. Meanwhile, they are not technically slower. They're speed 7 as opposed to speed 6. But
Yeah, so they
because
lose an
their
inch.
extra because their extra movement is so conditional, and you're having to do it without Archon, it just feels much worse. Now,
Yeah.
one interesting thing about these guys, though, is that they have a melee attack at map 4, and it's just any attack. So what you could do is you could have the three of them fly up to something with the plus Marcher Worlds card on, putting them in mat 6, and then it's not unlikely for them to hit things.
That's true, actually.
So then they spike, and the model that you want to move the extra distance, like if you need to just extend out to a point, he attacks first so that he moves, and then the other two can attack that thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it mildly interesting for this squad, at least. So we'll talk about the other squad in just a minute, but for this squad, at least, I think that card makes this semi-interesting.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, actually, and that makes them super lethal.
It
It
makes
also-
them very lethal. It'll make them it's potentially also making them very fast. And like Sneaky was saying, if you have a situation where you can do your attacks and then move, you can actually get this squad pretty.
Yeah, it's
Now the Matt does the attachment have a? Yeah, he does actually have a melee attack.
yeah, it's
I did not even realize.
yeah, it's definitely a utility piece for sure. Where like you're not going to use it most of the time, but every now and then, like it might come in clutch. So, I think the squad's fine enough as it is to stand on its own.
Well, before
Yeah.
we even talk about their weapons, I think that this squad kind of is. This squad is actually more where I was expecting squads to end up in this Kickstarter. Like they don't completely outshine the other squads to where they just aren't a choice anymore. But they're interesting enough that you probably want to take one or two.
I slightly disagree with you there. I think they outshine the majority of my squads. I think the only squad I maybe take is a heavy team because I like the rockets.
Well, I think the heavy team is really cool and interesting because Targeter on rockets is actually probably really good right now. Probably really good. I think that your Rangers fire team just does different things. Like they have much longer base range than these guys. They get to move faster. They have the null grenades. Like they're kind of your all-around squad, right?
I would maybe take one of them.
I mean, people
just
aren't
for the
taking
null
Ranger fire
grenades?
teams anyways for the most part, in what I've seen. It's
for-
usually the infiltrators or the heavy team.
Even full battle force, though, I probably lean towards more of the cadre versus
Really?
yeah.
Well, the cadre has like internal synergy that is useful that the other squads don't have access to, which is kind of like the main reason you would want to go heavy in on the cadre. But if you're not going heavy on the cadre, I think you just take one of every squad, to be honest.
Yeah. And I honestly, I think with the way the meta is right now, the way I think the meta is going to turn up, I think that honestly going two of the heavy squads over a regular Ranger squad is probably a decent argument.
Yeah. You've got a lot of options.
Yeah. But let's get to their weapons. These guys have a compact battle rifle, which is the same battle rifle you know and love, except it's range 10, POW 4, and doesn't have any kind of way to increase the range.
So it's not the same battle rifle you know.
Well, it's like the same thing. It's just it's a different range. That's all. And then you have the fusion axe, which is, I believe that's the same exact thing the infiltrators have. It's a range 1 POW 5 kinetic weapon.
But this one doesn't have cleave.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think they've done a really interesting thing with the Marcher World squads where they all have their give and takes. Like flying melee has a premium to it.
Yep.
Because there's so much more flying in the game now, and because flying feels much more relevant than it was, right? Because most squads before had a ranged attack of some sort. So, like squad versus squad combat, like you didn't have this range no range attack disparity like you do now. Like none of the new AC squads have range attacks, except for the Relicon when you add that onto the talents. But the other squads are going to really struggle into these guys, right?
One thing I want to try out after listening to Sneaky talk about how he takes both the extra attack cards and Empyreans is playing 2 units of these guys and bringing both attack cards.
Oh yeah, these guys can make either of those cards really good.
Yeah, like you go up to 9 attacks, or 9 or 12 if you have the attachment on. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean the main issue is like on Empyreans, both of my squads have ranged and melee attacks, whereas for you that's not the case. But if you take 2 strike teams, then sure, but then you're buying 2 boxes of well, actually, then you wouldn't get access to the Storm Vulture, but yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
That will be covered in its entirety. Justin is ready.
Yeah, I think this squad is the more interesting of your new squads. I think it's I think just because March of Worlds has that map buff card, it becomes much more interesting, and flight on melee flight is just good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this squad is literally just a better Paladin Enforcer squad. It's faster, it flies, it has a higher mat, and it has a higher POW on its weapon. Like, it's just better Enforcers. And Enforcers are great. Like, so, I mean, this is a good squad. The other one...
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts on this one, John?
So I think they're just like an upgrade to the Infiltrators. I don't see myself taking Infiltrators anymore with having access to these guys.
Really?
Yeah, they're a little like more costly to deploy, but they just do so much more than the Infiltrators. I know the Infiltrators have cleave and have their crazy grenades, so they probably have more upside to them.
They also have Slip Displacer and...
Yeah, I think there's side grades to Infiltrators, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Infiltrators are just so good that even with, like, I do appreciate that these guys have a range attack, right?
Yeah,
like,
I like the utility of having a
more
range
situations
attack.
where they're gonna be able to do something.
The amount of times I've went in on things with Infiltrators, killed one in like a couple attacks, and had like an attack left over that I can't put into anything. It's nice to be able to go in, hatchet something to death, and be able to shoot out of melee at something else.
Better Enforcers.
Fair.
Yeah. I think this squad is exciting, and people will want this squad.
I really like them.
I honestly think if you're taking the cadre, you do plan, like, if they ever do eventually sell them as separate parts, all the things, you probably take 2 squads of these, one of the other guys, just so you have the cadre, and then you can kind of fill out the rest from there.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely getting at least 1, if not 2. I'm probably going pretty hard into the cadre this Kickstarter because my cadres look so cool and feel to me like functional upgrades to most of my units.
Yeah, I think this whole cadre aesthetically is cool as hell. I love their... If people listening to this haven't seen the pictures for these models, the little jetpacks they gave all of March of Worlds are just really cool. They have these really crazy, like, turbines on their backs.
Yeah, helicopter
I love
backpacks. Yeah.
I love it. I love the aesthetics of this whole cadre.
Yeah, no. They look
I'm
amazing.
I'm the odd guy out that doesn't like the helicopter backpacks, but that's fine.
Boo on
I
you,
mean,
sir.
if it was like an Inspector Gadget helicopter backpack, I would not be into it, right? But these are really cool. I like these better than Rocket Impact.
All right, then on to the other squad, which is the Dragoon Assault Team.
The Dragoon Assault Team is exactly the same, except they don't have Mat 4 because they don't have any melee weapons. But their weapons are the only thing that changes on the card otherwise. And they just have 2 battle rifles, which are, despite being called battle rifles, are not the battle rifles you know and love, because they don't have the range extension on charge. They're just range 12 POW 4 ballistic battle rifle.
Yeah. So when it comes to this squad, I have played them a fair bit, and I love this squad.
Really?
The ability to get 12 ranged attacks at, what is it, range 14?
12.
12? 12. After moving 7, so you're at like 19 inches without anything. Like, that's so crazy. If
Well,
not more when you count the guys you place.
I guess you could get 12 if you have. No, you get 11 with the attachment, or 13 with the attachment and the quartermaster. But you're not getting 12.
Doesn't the attachment? Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. So 11.
That's
Though
with
that does
complex.
with the quartermaster, that sounds pretty juicy, even though that's like the most expensive unit ever. But
DC4.
boy, do I look forward to using that.
Which this day and age DC4 isn't. It is what it is.
Hey,
Yeah.
tell it to regulators. You can go up to DC5.
The only DC5 unit in the game.
And you know what? They definitely don't feel like they're in DC5. But that's another podcast.
But
You just never want the quartermaster on regulators. There's just
so I 100% take these over the Ranger Fire team. I'd probably slot in a Ranger Fire team as like an option just for null grenades if I think that's going to have a massive effect on the game. But outside of that, like, I just overall like this better. Like we said, flying in this game is a premium. There's lots of things with melee. So I feel like they're just a sturdier fire team, especially once we start talking about some of the other synergies they have.
That's probably fair.
And their reach, like the ability to be able to reach out and touch stuff with this unit, just feels really good compared to like when I sent a Ranger Fire team out. I knew I was always sending it out to take some shots and then die. Where this team still
Ranger Fire teams, once you have them charged, right? They're 6 inches plus 16. They actually reach further than these guys.
Yeah, but they still feel like they're just going to die.
But then you can also slip displacer them back.
Correct.
I mean, I think Ranger Fire teams you can play more cagey than these guys. The thing is, like, if you're up against melee, these guys have a reasonable chance of surviving.
And they also have
solo. They become there's rules of the solo that actually help them out a whole lot.
And they have an extra attack, and Josh just wants to roll more dice.
Exactly.
More dice, more better. That is like our podcast motto.
Yeah, come on. I play Marcher Worlds. More dice, more better is all we do. So that's, I don't know. In my playtesting, they have just felt stronger to me than Ranger Fire Team, which I've never been a major fan of in the past.
Yeah, I think my only disappointment in this squad is that, like, all the other cadres, you look at the two squads and there's like a very big distinction between them. And these two squads, it's okay. Well, one traded its gun for a fusion blade and went to map 4.
That's your only disappointment? My only disappointment's the RAT3.
Yeah,
that's my disappointment.
It's pretty rough, especially considering I think pretty much everybody else, all the new squads went up to 4 and whatever they're proficient at.
Yep, it's a big old kick in my balls.
The Empyrean squads are just 4 at everything. The AC squads are 4 and 5 at melee, but that's all they do. My one range attack is Rat 3, so.
But yeah, no, that's my only gripe.
Cover too.
I do like them. I'm going to be probably picking up 2 just to have the options. I'm going very heavy into the cadre, which I'll get to as things carry on.
Okay. So now that we've talked about the 2 base squads, let's talk about the attachment for it. The attachment is the Dragoon Gunner, and he can get attached to either one of these squads. This is actually the only cadre that has an attachment that can go for both squads. All the other cadres that have attachments can only attach to one of the squads. So March Worlds is the only ones getting 2 attachments in their cadre box. So,
which is exciting.
Dragoon Gunner, you add 1 to the DC to add him. He's speed 7, mat 3, rat 3, defense 3, armor 3, 30mm base with flight. So the same stats as the shooty boys. He has, for his charge, reflex accelerator. When this model makes its attacks during its activation while charged, it can attack with all of its weapons. So same charge. And then he actually has a really cool weapon. It's called the Particle Blaster. It's range 8, PAL 5. So it's a pretty strong gun. Is there any other squad with a PAL 5 range weapon?
Don't think so.
It's an energy weapon. It has a charge on, or a spike on it called Reserve Power Cells. When this model makes an attack with this weapon, it can spike to reroll an attack or damage roll. So that's really good. And then he has Singularity Collapse on there, the non-blast blast that you all know and love from from Fiddler and the Strike Raptor. If this weapon targets and destroys an enemy model, other models within 2 inches of the model targeted suffer a PAL 4 damage roll.
So the attachment literally just has Fiddle's weapon. Like, Fiddle's gun is called the Particle Blaster.
But his is range 12, right?
Yeah, his is range 12, so they're just a shorter range, but it's called the exact same weapon.
Fiddle's is range 14.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's range 12 on his...
That's right, because you're talking about Axel has the same gun as him.
On the Strike Raptor is range 12. Fiddle's is 14 with high intensity, same gun as Axel, and this one's range 8.
Right. All them particle cannons all blur together for me.
So just the ability, and then he also has a fusion blade, which is range 1, PAL 3. He's solid. It is Matt Rat 3, which is a little sad. I kind of wish the attachment at least had been like Rat 4.
Yeah.
That kind of might have made the other models feel a little, okay, they're Rat 3 because this guy's got the particle cannon.
Rat 4 on the particle cannon, though, on a squad would be pretty obscene. So
I mean, we've seen some pretty obscene stuff in this Kickstarter, right?
Oh, it's true. I'm just trying not to like overwish, I guess, because this model slots in so nicely with what I want to do. Like, I've been taking a lot of the Ranger Heavy team because I like the ability to get rid of things and, again, roll more dice on explosion rolls. And I take Fiddler and Co. because his Particle Blaster puts in work. So just being able to attach it to each one of my cadre feels obscene, especially when you factor in the last squad we talked about with all the ranged attacks. Now you have 2 Particle Blaster ranged attacks as well. So your ability to clear out a section of the board is actually pretty good as long as like dice somewhat go in your favor.
Well, and what's more is that like with his gun, if you're not spiking for the movement on the squad, like if you don't need that really random movement, then his spike is actually super valuable and it adds a lot more consistency to his gun, where he gets to either reroll an attack or damage roll.
Yeah, so this is where I would personally be putting my arc efficiency with that unit. If I absolutely needed the movement, yeah, I guess I would risk it. But otherwise, I would save this guy till last after all the other attacks and use him as cleanup, and just use him to spike off my arc.
Yeah, I think he's super valuable, and I think that if people are smart, they're going to go and try and knock him out of your units really quick, because just having that particle blaster is pretty scary.
Yeah, I do think he is the piece you want to target out first if you have to choose a squad A to kill. But I think them as a package with both units is super good. I am not disappointed with the cadre at all on a performance level, on a appearance level. They add a lot to March of Worlds.
Yeah, I think they're super cool. Is there anything else we wanted to say about the squads? And remember, all those defense numbers have a little asterisk.
No, let's go ahead and tell them why the asterisk is there.
Okay, because the solo for this cadre is the Dragoon Strike Team Leader. He's Speed 7, Mat 4, Rat 4, Defense 4. So he's a flat upgrade on those 3 stats from the squads. Armor 3. The original printing of the card did not have any boxes for him, but he is a 2-box solo on a 30mm base with Flight and Weapon Master. He has a spike for Command Interface Dragoon. During its activation, this model can spike to remove the activation token from a friendly Dragoon squad within 10 inches of it. Super solid ability to have if you absolutely need to double activate a squad, or if somebody cryo locks it early. It's an ability that's good to have. So it's never a bad ability card, and he can even use it if there's no squads in range of him. So he doesn't have to be stuck with art. So it's always good just to have that. What?
I love this piece.
Yeah, he's great. I think the rule that makes him like auto take anytime you're like, well, I mean, if you're taking the cadre, you're taking him anyways. But the rule that just really makes him pivotal to the whole cadre is Flight Commander. Friendly squad models with flight gain +1 defense while within 10 inches of this model.
Yes, sir. So
That's really good. Here's a question, Sneaky, off the top of your head. Do you remember if the flight squad card stays for the pulse round or if it's just the activation?
It's pulse round.
yeah,
So you can actually choose one of your old squads to have +1 defense for a whole pulse round.
yeah. I mean, that's a little inefficient. I would rather use the.
Well, right. Yeah, I mean, you're probably not running that with this guy.
No, well, I'm not running it specifically because the defense, the squad card, the +1 defense, and being able to reroll.
Well, I think there's an argument where if you're running like 3 of the old squads where you could run both. Because the +1 defense will stack on these guys and make them defense 5 while he's within 10 inches.
Yeah,
But
like if you're only taking one cadre in your full battle force, then like there's definitely an argument for running the flight card, but the +1 defense card is obscene on these guys because
yeah,
I mean defense 5 re-rollable is gross.
And when you put a quartermaster on there, her being defense 5 with the 3 boxes and everything, it's actually a little spicy once you add a quartermaster.
Yeah, and then you factor in the melee defense bonus as well. They are quite a sturdy unit.
Yeah, I mean the quartermaster doesn't gain flight.
Right.
Yeah.
Like having defense 4 squads is a thing.
Yeah.
Like I have a hard time hitting those Aeons, the Angels, because they're defense 4 armor 3 base.
Yeah. Although the quartermaster does suddenly become part of the cadre when it's attached to one of these, which is interesting. More for AC and Empyreans, but is also interesting.
But yeah, this piece like ties the whole cadre together because our theme is kind of flight. So the +1 to defense is huge. Combined with the other defensive tech in Marcher Worlds, like setting stuff on fire and whatnot, I haven't had enough time to test it on full battle force, but it could have a profound effect on full battle force with making themselves hard to remove from points. I mean, they are still a squad, but I think outside of AC's tanky boys, they probably just became, in the right conditions, one of the hardest squads to remove in the game.
Until you look at Angels, but
well, we could say that about every Empyrean piece.
Yeah, that's fair.
But this episode's
actually,
about Marcher Worlds.
What's really cool is that he also has heightened reflexes, right? So when this model is targeted by an attack, after the attack is resolved, it can move up its reflex cortex that doesn't require a charge on this solo. So there's going to be situations in the game sometimes where you don't want to activate this solo, but you want to move your squad, and then they move out of range of him. If your opponent isn't careful and they make attacks at him before they go for your squad or something, he can actually move during their turn into range, which is an interesting thing. And just I think anytime you can position him near an objective and just threaten to, hey, if you target me, I'm going to contest this, I think it's super valuable.
Yeah, I think there is a argument to be made to put even more defensive tech into Marcher Worlds, using the giving everything within 2 inches or within 5 inches, is it?
Yeah, 5 inches.
+2 defense.
Yeah.
So you combine that with the cortex on the Duskwolf that Justin loves so much to give it extra defense, and then suddenly you have this very tanky, very defensive core that you just can't remove off a point unless you're dissecting it piece by piece, and you may not want to have to shoot that Duskwolf before you shoot the defense 7 squad or whatever it is.
For those of you keeping track at home, that means you can get all the squads in this cadre, well, one of the squads in this cadre up to defense 7. 3 base, 1 for the strike team leader, 1 for the squad card that gives +1 defense, and then 2 for the Warjack card that lets you add +2 defense to warrior models within 5 inches.
Yeah, like it's probably not something that'll come up too often, but it could be massive.
Well,
and
every once in a while, you'll have that game where it's going to be there's one more point they have to take, and you can set up this crazy combo, and they're going to be like, oh, I have to destroy 3 def 7 things, or oh, well, let me see what the jack is. Oh, the jack is also like defense stupid.
yeah,
Like, there's no winning here.
no, it has a ton of potential, and I'm super excited for the fact that they took the defensive side of Marcher Worlds even farther, because now it really begs to play like a fire heavy defense build and just see how non-traditional with Marcher Worlds you can get. Like they've always had the tech in there, but it's always been more about Marcher Worlds killing stuff before they were killed versus like making this defense brick and making your opponent kind of slug you out for points, which I'm really excited to try out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to explore with this cadre, and like I think one of the things that's gonna determine how good or bad this cadre is how often and how easy you can get some of these combos going. Because I think the squads are, at their base level, I think they're solid, they're good, they compete really well with the old squads. But as you start adding these different things to them, they suddenly really start to shine, and you see them in a whole new light once you start to piece together all these little pieces that they can do.
Oh yeah, you're totally right. Like when I evaluated them, like when you read them off, I was basing them on how they feel with the whole package and not just like on individual merit. As like a full cadre, they have a lot going for them, and I definitely want to take multiples.
Yeah, I think there's an argument both ways. Like whether you want to take multiples or just one and done, and then if you want more stuff in the cadre, just kind of sprinkling those in.
Yeah, I think Marcher Worlds did the best job in terms of design wise of having a feeling of a very synergistic cadre. Like AC has it as well, but you have to keep things charged. Give up a couple of different things for this. For Marcher World one, is just if you have the dude on the field, he buffs everything else, and then it all feels good. Like so.
Yeah. Well, I think Marcher Worlds did the best job of not making their new stuff just flat out better.
Yeah, I mean it's also
because I personally also just value slip displacer so high that these squads not having it is like where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the really cool things about this cadre so far is just that it doesn't feel like I'm having to just scrape half my squads back on into the trash.
Yeah. For sure.
That's great design on that part. And we haven't even talked about his weapons yet. The Dragoon Strike team leader has a compact battle rifle. It's the same as the melee squad. It's range 10, POW 4, ballistic. Just a good solid thing to have, and he's RAP 4, so he can actually use it pretty well. And then he has an energy blade, which is a range 1, POW 4, high intensity weapon.
Sounds
and
good.
High intensity on a solo that just does what he does is really good. I'm telling you what, after looking at this cadre, the Nemesis has got to be scared.
Oh yeah.
Like Nemesis has never had such a hard time in its life, and it already struggled, and now it's struggling even more.
Yeah, they just dismantle a Nemesis.
Yeah, you can't take a Nemesis into Marcher Worlds. Like you already couldn't, but now you really can't.
Yeah, I mean, it was, the Nemesis. I feel bad because he after this update, he just has so many scary things to deal with. Between like Phaetheon, the Empyrean's flying squad, and now all of the Marcher World offerings here. It's a real scary world for the Nemesis right now. I think the Nemesis gets shelved.
Yeah, with all the new melee on the squads and the high mat and everything else going on, there is a case for salvage to be taken. I still think it's a little niche, but I think in certain situations it could help you
Oh, I
outpace.
think your new squad could definitely, the melee squad could definitely get you a salvage point.
Yeah, but I mean, it would
Especially
probably
if
be
somebody's silly
better.
enough to bring their nemesis.
Yeah, but it would be better in a world where like body count didn't exist, because I don't think you outpace body count still. But
It really depends. It depends on how many jacks people are bringing, because everybody's bringing more squads now, right? Like I don't think there's any argument that people are bringing any less squads.
Mhm.
And in skirmish, people are literally doubling the number of squads they have.
yeah,
But the thing that's happening now, though, is that a lot of these squads have some pretty decent defensive tech. Like trying to get the body count off of a lot of them is pretty hard.
yeah. But I'm just talking about like strictly like a point for point under current system. Like salvage can't keep up with body count. I think body count gets slightly harder to get, as you alluded to, but I still think it, like, in a normal game, outpaces anything. But in a world where it didn't exist, I think there is an argument for at least March of Worlds for salvage to be the pick.
Yeah, I would say that's probably true. The problem is like one of your squads doesn't have any melee attacks, and it's only melee attacks from squaddies killing a warjack. So
Yeah,
it's,
I
I
think you
one of
would
your
just have
squads
to
being
take 2
completely
melee.
incapable of doing that is rough.
Yeah, I would just take 2 melee cadre.
Oh,
in
so
that
you're not
situation.
taking any of the cadre. Like you're not taking a full cadre at all.
No, not in that situation. I mean, I would take one, but I would probably end up using the two melee squads and probably leave, unless I have all my stuff out, it would probably be the cadre I summon third. You know what I mean? I would be keeping my melee out there as much as possible.
Yeah.
If I'm trying to pull off salvage, like cover as much of the field as possible kind of deal.
Yeah, I think AC and Empyreans have a little bit more of an edge in that regards, and to a lesser degree ISA, because they've got enforcers and regulators. But March Worlds has infiltrators and the assault team. So
I was gonna say March of Worlds hits harder, or more like the other squads are more survivable. Like we are PAL 5.
yeah, well, I mean,
So they're PAL 5 too. But they're DC3, and it's really awkward. But I mean, at least both of them can buff the mat the same, so it's like that's not even an argument.
Yeah.
So I think the March of Worlds probably has the edge on the salvage for over, like if you don't care about completing cadres, right? If you just say, hey, I'm gonna go into this game and I'm gonna bring 2 of the air dragoons and I'm gonna bring like 3 infiltrator squads and that's what I'm doing in full size, then I think you're probably fine. But I think you do take at least one whole cadre.
Maybe one. But we'll talk about that when we get to the champion model.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the champion model. The champion model for the March Worlds cadre is the Storm Vulture. It's a champion vehicle. It is DC3, just like all the other vehicles. Speed 6, Strength 5, Mat 4, Rat 4, Defense 2, Armor 4 with 3 boxes. This vehicle is also on a 50mm base and has flight. Just like all other vehicles, it has maneuvers that it can do at the beginning of its activation. The first one is Sow the Field. This vehicle can be nominated to place a Void Gate this turn as if it was a warrior model. One thing to note about that is that it is only this turn. So if it isn't like it just turns it into a warrior model for Void Gate placement for your pult until it's activated again, it is just that turn. So you only choose this maneuver if you actually plan on placing a Void Gate off of it at the end of its activation. Just be aware of that. Its next maneuver is called Wide Range Scan. Friendly models can reroll attack rolls against enemy models with flight within 10 inches of this model. A roll can never be rerolled once as a result of Wide Range Scan. This maneuver expires at the start of this model's next activation. It's actually, there's some implications for this, and I think it's matchup dependent entirely. Because, against like AC, this is only going to give you rerolls versus Raytheon.
It makes me a little sad that
Nemesis?
it's not all attacks. Being like a flying thing, you figured it would have just as good, like it would have view of the ground too for its scans. But I get that might make it a little too powerful.
Well, what's nice is that It lets you reroll all attack rolls for your entire army against the opponent's flying models, so it makes them bringing out their flying models more of a consideration rather than like an auto do.
Yeah.
Unless you're
Well,
Marcher Worlds, now all your stuff is flying.
Let's get back to let's finish off its rules, and then we'll circle back to the opinion on it.
Yeah. But I do think wide range scan is good. I think it's matchup dependent. I think, AC, you're gonna not really get much use out of it if they've stopped bringing their nemesis, but it's a good rule to have. Being able to reroll your attack rolls against all the flying things within 10 inches of the Storm Vulture is pretty good.
Yeah.
Its final maneuver with both feet. When this model advances and ends its movement this turn, it can immediately make one melee attack against an enemy model within 1 inch. If the target is hit before damage is rolled, the model hit is slammed directly away from the attacking model. Roll a number of action dice equal to this model's strength, which in this case is 5, and it actually makes a situation where the strength stat matters. For every strike rolled, move the model hit 1 inch. The model hit suffers a damage roll equal to the POW, with a POW equal to this model's strength. Collateral damage is equal to this model's strength. So this is essentially a maneuver that gives you the overdrive momentum. What is it? Momentum calibrator? Yeah.
Yep.
And it's your first attack you have to do right after moving. It's a good rule. It gives you an extra attack. Extra attacks are always good.
More dice, more better.
Yeah. It's mildly frustrating that it isn't like when any time during your activation you get this extra attack, because you could potentially throw a target that you want to attack out of your melee weapons range. But we'll get into that. But it is a potential for one of the longest base slams in the game without having to play a card. Just depends on how well you roll on those 5 strike dice. So I do think that is interesting, or action dice. I think that's really interesting, and people know I love slams.
So,
yes.
In regards to this model, the slam maneuver is cool, and it's the one that I find myself using the most.
Yeah, I think the other options are okay, but more often than not, the slam is the right answer.
Yeah. More attacks, more better, and then you placing a void gate. Normally speaking, I will have faster, better models up the field already to place a void gate off of, so it is pretty situational in that regards. And unfortunately, the defensive stats for this model just make me the big sad. In most games where I've played this, it gets removed off the table fairly trivially.
Yeah, I think we had a game where the underboss just one-shot it.
Yep, yeah, we did. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yep. Because defense 2, armor 4, 3 boxes is a pretty mopey defensive stat line. It's the exact same stat line as a Marauder. Unfortunately, the gang boss has armor piercing, so he happens to roll a 9. So I think it was one of those situations where Josh rolled blanks, and then, which isn't hard to do on defense 2, where you can never have cover.
Yeah.
So he rolled blanks, and I think I rolled a decent roll, and once you get the 9, he's just dead.
Defense 2 combined with the vehicle is big sadness.
I mean, here's my question: where would you like his stats to end up?
I would be fine with one more defense probably, and or one more armor. I'm not sure if 1 and 1 would be too much, but it at least needs one or the other, just so it has a little staying power on the table. Because currently it almost feels like a waste of a deployment for me, because it doesn't have the offensive output of some of my other options that I would activate in its place, and it doesn't really have any staying power for as far as contesting goes. So I just don't see myself activating it unless for some reason it's all I have left.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. Part of me thinks that maybe this stat line is kind of intentional. And I kind of wonder if just giving it 2 more boxes would give you the durability, make your engineers feel a little better, and just make it have the durability it needs.
I'd be cool with that. That sounds like an interesting change.
I think it's like an interesting way to go with it, rather than just like giving it base stats, and drive those through.
It's just rough because defense 2 on a vehicle means like you're only ever rolling 2 white dice. You don't get cover.
Well, here's my problem with this model is that if it wasn't a champion model, would you ever take it?
No.
And I think that's the real problem, right? And I think every other faction, like, there's an argument to take their model if it wasn't free in a free list slot, right? Like the Marcher World's cadre, you're building the cadre to get this model, and I don't think people even want to, like, I love the looks of this model. Aesthetically, I want to play this model.
I was just gonna say
let's actually finish talking about the model.
Okay.
We haven't.
So Josh jumped into the the defense debate early on, and we haven't even read his second card that isn't his.
Yeah, or talked about any of his weapons.
Yeah. So he has a charge, Arcantric Turbine. This model gains +1 speed for each arc it currently is charged with. Now, vehicles can only be charged with 1 arc. He starts off at speed 6, which makes him, I believe, the slowest base vehicle, and even the slowest vehicle after being charged, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's a walker. He's not like a speeder bike.
He's got turbines on his back. He flies.
Do you see how fat this thing is?
I mean, those goes 9 inches in a turn. I don't want to hear any arguments about how chunky something looks. The fact Totem is like the chunkiest medium base model of the game, and it's speed 6 over a lot of the other ones. Chunkiness is not equivalent to how fast they are in this game.
Just saying, those turbines, they'd have to do a lot of work.
I only have this.
A lot of work. But yeah, so it can go up to speed 7, flight. What else does it have?
It has a spike called Impulse Reciprocator. This is the same spike as on the Morningstar. When this model is targeted and hit by an enemy attack, it can spike once to use Impulse Reciprocator. This model uses Impulse Reciprocator immediately after the attack is resolved. This model can make 1 attack. One thing to note, that attack does not have to target whatever targeted it. So if you see your opponent having like a valuable solo activation and that solo looks killable to you with a Mat 4 or Rat 4, depending on what's in range and what you want to use, then this can actually be something that kind of gets you some value during your opponent's turn, which is really good. And let's jump into his weapons. So he has 2 weapons that are equipped base. The first is the Ripper, which is a range 2 POW 4 kinetic weapon with cleave. It's the exact same Ripper as is on the Dusk Wolf. And cleave is when this model destroys an enemy model with an attack with this weapon, you can immediately make 1 additional attack with this weapon. And then those attacks cannot generate attacks. So that's really cool. The Ripper is just always a very solid melee weapon just because you potentially get that value to get extra attacks. So if everything goes right and you have your maneuver, I mean, this thing, without looking at its hard points and weapon options that you can get for the third weapon, it could have, 4 attacks if it happens to kill somebody with the Ripper and has something with both beat range. So that's nice. Let's Josh roll all those dice. Its other base weapon is, I actually think it's kind of exciting, especially given the Kickstarter environment, is the Howitzer. It's a ballistic and explosion weapon, and so of course it has the blast rule. It's range 15, which is a really good base range. There's not many weapons in the game that are much higher than 14 for their range. And it's PAL 5. So PAL 5 blast. It's the only base PAL 5 blast in the game, if I recall, right?
Correct.
I think this is actually an interesting gun, especially since, there are a lot of squads coming out now, and a lot of them don't have compound armor. The Regulator's the only ones that have compound armor out of all of them. And PAL 5 will just destroy some of these squads. Or at least has a pretty good chance of destroying. Yeah. Like if you shoot this into a Talon squad and hit, you have a pretty good chance of killing all the Talons out of that squad.
Yep.
So don't sleep on that weapon.
Yeah. And then also, just to be pedantic, not all explosion weapons have the blast roll. So, yeah.
Which ones don't?
The vortex missiles.
Oh Hey, vortex missiles. That's a weapon we can talk about because this vehicle has 3 weapon options for its extra hard point. One of those weapon options is the vortex missile. It's a range 12 POW 4 ballistic explosion weapon, and it has the rule Null Blast. Immediately after hitting a target with this weapon, this model can spike once to clear 1 arc from the model hit by this weapon and from models within 2 inches of it. So Null Blast, vortex missiles, we've known them for a while. They've always existed. I don't think these are
Since
any different.
Kickstarter too.
Yeah. They haven't changed since the Warjack version, and the problem that I think a lot of Marcher Worlds players had before with wanting to actually use this weapon is that the Warjacks tend to want to keep the arc, whereas this vehicle generally doesn't super care, and being able to have a null with like a 2-inch thing off of it is really good, and this removes it from models. So it would remove it from a void gate if you had a void gate within 2 inches of your target.
Mm-hmm.
So super solid utility weapon option to have. I quite like it on this vehicle. It's one of the only ways it has to remove its arc. Like, it's actually the only way it can choose to remove its own arc.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people, I think, are going to find a lot of value just in that. But that's not to say its other weapon options aren't good. Its other weapon options are actually super solid. One of those other weapon options is the heavy machine gun. It's a ballistic weapon with range 14, POW 4, and it just has the strafe rule. So strafe is just more attacks, more better on this podcast. So super solid gun. Not a whole lot to really go into on that. Just always good.
It's a higher range cyclone cannon without defense matrix.
Exactly.
So.
And then we're going to have, Marcher Worlds, if you've got hard points, you probably have a strafe gun, a fire gun, and something with missiles in it. And this is no exception because its final option is a flamethrower. It's the same flamethrower as the Duskwolf and Strike Raptor. It's range 10, fire type, POW 3 with fire, continuous fire, and spray on it. So, another weapon that gives you potential, attack economy, which is always good. And sprays are always good.
Yeah. So I mean, overall, like there's potential for this thing to do a lot of work. I mean, being Rat 4, Mat 4 with only 1 arc is, a little bit limiting, but like it has a lot of weapons that have, blast, strafe, spray, cleave. It's got a bonus attack on it with both feet. I mean, it has the potential to do a lot of work just from throwing out tons of attacks with a bunch of dice. The only issue with this model is that it's so squishy.
Yeah, it has to live to do those things is the issue.
Yeah, and it's not hard to kill.
Don't get me wrong. I love the rules on this thing. I think it fits into the synergies well. I would love to be able to use it to throw out fire to then make my squads harder to kill and stuff like that. But unfortunately, at its current outfit with its stats, it just isn't worth deploying right now. There's a better use for that arc, unfortunately.
I tend to agree. I think anytime you put this out, if your opponent can get attacks on it and reasonably kill it, you're just wasting 3 DC.
Yeah.
Now, this is a fine model to put out, like if, as like that brick behind the corner, like if they can't really get to it, there's somewhere they want to get to that's near, to be in its range, fine. It's probably fine to do then. But there's not many of those situations, especially with how fast and deadly everything is in the game right now.
Yeah.
So
I think on full size it might have a little bit more of life to it, just because things are going to be more spread out. You can probably hide this thing behind terrain somewhere, and then because it has flight, it can pop out and just murder some things. But on skirmish, I mean, there's nowhere you can hide things on skirmish. The board's just too small. So
here's the question, Josh. In skirmish, and you're saying this isn't worth the whole cadre to take it for him. Are you running 2 squads now? Or are you sticking to your 1 squad guns?
I'm probably currently sticking to one squad, and I'm just supplementing with one of the new squads. Kind of basically like that's what this Kickstarter is for Marcher Worlds, in my opinion. Is it feels like we're taking our playstyle that's already established and just subbing in some better pieces. One of the pieces we'll talk about coming up, and then subbing in just an improvement on our squads and maybe a solo to make us a little more defensive. But other than that, it's still the Strike Raptor show. It's still deploying, like, you're still deploying an engineer into Strike Raptor turn 1, and then you're building out from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've talked the Storm Vulture to death. It has a lot of potential, but it's just too squishy. So let's jump into the new exciting thing that you're excited
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
This is the model I'm probably most excited for in this Kickstarter, as sad as that is. Just because I love this model. It's the Ranger Outrider. He's a DC2 solo. He's speed 8, which is, I think that makes him the fastest base solo.
Probably.
Because Raytheon is speed 8, but you have to kill him first.
Mhm.
So I think he is the fastest base solo, which is crazy. He's Mat 4, Rat 3, Defense 3, Armor 4 with 4 boxes. So that's the same base defensive stats as the Headhunter in the ISA cadre. So that's actually the same base stats as the Morningstar, but the Morningstar grabs it doesn't really stay that way. He's on a 50mm base. He has Pathfinder and he has Weapon Master. He has one of the better solo spikes in the game. He has Eclipse Drive. This unit can spike at the end of its activation to use Eclipse Drive. If it does so, don't place an activation token on it, which is just always solid when you mess with your activation token economy.
Mhm.
He has Sidestep. When this model hits an enemy model with an attack, after the attack is resolved, this model can move up to 1 inch. Super solid rule, and it's even better once we talk about his melee attack. So then he's also equipped with 2 weapons. He has a long rifle, which is a ballistic range 14 POW 4 gun with mechanical optics. So while he's charged, it's actually range 18, which means like on skirmish, you're almost never out of range of it if he's charged.
Mhm.
And then the weapon I'm super excited about, he has a headbutt. Because if you haven't seen this model, he is riding some kind of dinosaur chocobo, tauntaun, whatever you want to call it thing. And it's glorious looking. But it's got a headbutt that it uses. And it's a kinetic weapon, range 2, POW 5, with repulsor on it. And so repulsor is just if you hit something that is the same base size or smaller, you get a slam on it.
I'm going to go on record now saying he's definitely a Dino Tauntaun.
It's a naked
that's where
It's
he's
a
at.
naked chocobo. No.
I don't even want to think of a naked chocobo.
Well, too bad. You're getting one in your army.
Yeah, I mean, I think this weapon alone makes me super excited. I love slams in general, but slams with like a Pachycephalosaurus riding dude is just amazing. I love this model, and I think actually one thing that's really nice for Marcher Worlds is that he adds something they kind of really needed. He's a durability solo. And a lot of the times when I play against Marcher Worlds, one thing that happens is because it's the Strike Raptor show, they have a really hard time placing those deep gates, at least in skirmish. And this guy's going to let you do it. He moves 8, potentially 10 inches if he hits with both of his attacks. And then you get to place a gate off of that, and it's a 50mm base. He's going to get places, and he's going to let you put gates there. So I think he does a lot for the faction.
Yeah, for sure. And you can keep reactivating him. He's a great contesting piece. You can slam stuff off of points and then move on to it with sidestep. Like, this is a great scenario piece.
Yeah.
I think he's just an all-around solid model, and he's DC2, and I think he's probably one of the more fair DC2 models in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he doesn't have super high output. He's just great for scenario.
Yeah,
like he's thick. You can sit him on a point, and I don't it's nice because I don't feel like I have to activate him after that. Once I get him on a point, he's one of the only solos in my faction where I'm like, okay, I'm happy not activating you and you can just sit there. Where, like, I have to activate everything else or feel the need to activate everything else. It's nice to have a set it and forget it.
Yeah, I think the only thing that makes me a little sad for this model is just that he's Rat 3. I don't know why they couldn't have given him Rat 4.
Yeah.
He is DC 2. Like,
He's bouncing up and down on a chocobo. It's hard to shoot things, man.
I mean,
I
I'll give
don't
that
know.
to you. That's some good reasoning.
eh. I still think he could have been Rat 4, but whatever. It's small. I think he's still solid. I don't think he's bad for being Rat 3. I think he will do the things that he's supposed to do very well. And I'm very excited to see him on the table. So
As I was saying right before we mentioned this model, he slots in automatically, in my opinion, and helps just basically accents how we already play. Now we can, like, it's still the Strike Raptor show, but on the activations, we don't need to activate an engineer to, like, take an activation token off or something. You can have one or two of these guys and be moving them to points to contest.
well, what I think is also my mental image of him going up a ladder on this chocobo thing is just hilarious. So I love everything about this model. He's just he has range output, he has melee output, he has slams, he has activation token shenanigans, he's durable, he's fast, he's just very, very good. And I think if the Divine Tempest and the Saber solo didn't exist, we'd be like, man, this model's a little busted. In a world where they exist, he's pretty tame.
I mean, I think he's right along there with the Saber solo.
You think
I mean,
so?
yeah.
The Saber's Mat 4 Rat 4 has the same spike, has a gun that has a slam on it that slams any size base, and his melee
That's
attack is just super good. Like, he can have armor piercing, he can have strafe. He's only one less speed. He's got one less box, but the same defensive stats otherwise.
I mean, that one box makes a big difference. This guy's also got sidestep. Like, I think they're close.
I think they're close. They just serve different roles. The Empyrean solo is like an output solo. You want it running up and armor piercing something and obliterating it. Where, like I said, this guy is just like you push him onto the point and he just sits there and your opponent has to dedicate lots of offense to remove him while your Strike Raptor flies around and annihilates things. And chances are, in most cases, your opponent's not going to have the resources to take off both the Outrider and your Strike Raptor. So it's kind of, you got to pick whether you're sacrificing a scenario to get rid of the big threat, or vice versa. Do you go after the big threat and just let them take scenario?
Yeah, and I mean, if something moves onto the point, you just activate the Outrider again because it's not going to have an activation token, and you just go, get off my point.
Yeah.
Or
I think he's super cool. I love this model. Like, I want to just paint one of these. Like, I don't even, like, he looks like he'll be fun to paint.
I'll send you mine.
Okay.
For pictures of Justin painting my Tauntaun coming up in the future.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that.
So we have one more model?
One more model.
One more Marcher Worlds model. Two
One
more
more
Marcher Worlds.
So we have their hero solo that they got added. That's War Chief Malik Cesar. He's DC 1, Speed 6, Mat 4, Rat 4, Defense 3, Armor 4. He's on a 30mm base with Pathfinder Weapon Master, and he has 3 boxes. He has, for Spike, Command Interface Ranger. So he works pretty well with all those Ranger teams that you used to have a ton of. During its activation, this model can spike to remove an activation token from a friendly Ranger squad within 10 inches of it. So what's kind of interesting is that Marcher Worlds now has activation removal for all of their squads, because the solo for the Dragoons has it, and then now he adds it for the old Ranger squads. So never a bad ability to have, and it just lets him get rid of Arc if he cares to. And it's only if he cares to, because his charge is Mimetic Cloak. the charge you know and love from AC. While this model is charged, it gains stealth. And a model with stealth can't be targeted by attacks made more than 8 inches away. Potentially a super solid thing. If he's sitting on a point, nothing can get within 8 inches of him. He's untouchable. So that's interesting. I think it'll be a rule that you try and exploit a little more on full size than skirmish. But I mean, it does have its situational use. He also has Spider, which is this model can never suffer fall damage. So that's super cool. You can run him off of buildings and never have to worry about it, which I think it's a super cool rule. I don't know how useful it'll be game to game to game, and I think meta to meta this rule will see more or less use. But solid rule to have, because I know that sometimes just jumping off of elevations is the play, right? You have to do that, or you just lose the game.
Yeah, definitely had game swing based off the jump.
One of his best rules, though, is fire and displace. Immediately after resolving a range attack made by this model can now move 3 inches. It's the same ability that the Hunter has and that Axel has. Now, the difference between him and those two models, though, is he has 2 weapons that he can do with it, and so this can trigger twice in one activation for him. So his speed 6 is a little bit deceptive, because as long as he gets to make both of his range attacks, he doesn't have to hit, he doesn't have to do anything, but after resolving each range attack, he gets to move 3 inches. So he's technically a speed 12 model as long as you can target something. Just super solid utility to have. He has 2 range attacks. One is the light flamethrower. Says exactly what it is on the tin. It's a fire weapon with spray and fire. It's range 6 and POW 3. So it's a 4-inch shorter range than the same one that's on the Storm Vulture, the Dusk Wolf, the Strike Raptor. It's the same gun, but 4 inch less range. And then he has his own thumper cannon. It's a ballistic weapon that's range 10 POW 4. It has armor piercing, and while he's charged, he has mechanical optics. So that's the +4 range on it. So it could be a range 14 POW 4 armor piercing gun. Now, Josh, I know you love this dude. Let's hear what you have to say about him.
He is a Swiss Army knife. In my few games with him, he does a little bit of everything, and it's so nice to have the options he brings. He hits decently hard. He's another source of the fire I love. He is fast, can get onto points, or kind of duck and weave through things. He's fairly tanky. I haven't had him get too obliterated when I've played him. His stealth rule, I've only played him on skirmish, so his stealth rule hasn't really come into play yet. But I think on full battle force, it'll be a very nice addition to him.
Yeah, it has the potential on full battle force.
My only issue, if I had to pick a complaint about him, is just that Marcher Worlds are fairly stacked in the hero department now, especially with all the new wild cards. So I don't know how often you take him over other pieces from a competitive standpoint, but from just a throwing stuff on the table and having fun standpoint, I'll take this guy any day of the week.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that he's an output solo with, I think the range 6 on his flamethrower is kind of limiting for him. And
yeah, it's not the greatest.
Yeah, I think if it was a range 10 flamethrower, I think he's there. I think he has much more utility and usefulness. But I think at range 6, you kind of range 6 also makes the stealth potential not feel as good either. Because generally things are, once they're in that range, they can move to negate your stealth anyways. I think he's just not exciting compared to some of the other cool utility picks you get. But that's me. I'm not a Marcher Worlds player. Maybe Marcher Worlds players are like, I need more output solos. And sure, he's an output solo. He will put some hurt on some things. So for me, he's not exciting. But I'm not a Marcher Worlds main, so maybe I just don't know what the faction actually.
Like I said, from a competitive standpoint, he's not my first pick. But from having a jack of all trades selection, he's great. Like, if I need options, he's the piece I'll reach for. But if I'm looking for someone to do a specific task well, we have a lot of other candidates.
Yeah. Well, I think this guy is, if you're running ranger teams in primary missions, I think he's almost an auto take, just to have that option of removing their activation tokens, because that can be really, really good.
Well, I read the Arc Economist article, and he said that activating squads multiple times not efficient.
Okay. And at the same time, like, he has the potential to do some output. So I think Malik is definitely really valuable in that regards. Like, just from what he offers, the whole army, and since I'm putting this directly because they're the two most comparable like heroes versus Axel. Like in Martial Worlds, I would take Malik over Axel every day.
Really? I think Axel over Malik.
I mean, you get comparative. I mean, you get an extra attack that's a flamethrower. His attack has armor piercing instead of singularity collapse and high intensity. They're almost the same defensive stats, and this guy can move faster and gives your army utility. So I mean, I would take Malik as Martial Worlds over Axel, for sure.
I would take Axel, but that's me. I personally might just like Axel too much. So I recognize I might have a problem.
Yeah. Well, you're also obsessed with like the singularity collapse cannon, but Martial Worlds has that coming out of the wazoo, so they don't need
That's
another
fair.
singularity collapse cannon, right? They
That's
don't need it. But,
That's super fair.
Yeah. And then on to our last model of the
Now-
episode.
Now, the wild card that we're sharing for this episode is Fenric Leach, free agent. And I think that arguably with the way the Marcher World solo roster is stacked right now, like the Weaver was already a hard take sometimes. And so I think people might reach for this guy every once in a while. So let's tell you a little bit about him. He's speed 6, mat 4, rat 3, def 3, armor 4, focus 5, 3 boxes. He's on a 30mm base, and he works for anybody. Well, anybody currently out right now. If they bring a new faction, I guess he technically doesn't work for them yet. He is Arc Relay 12, so that's good. That's a straight buff over the normal Marcher Worlds Weaver, who's only Arc Relay 10. He has the same charge as the normal Marcher Worlds Weaver, where while he's charged, he gets plus 5 inches range. So Arc Relay 17 while charged. That's good. 17-inch range on your Furies is really good. So, he also has a charge for the Mimetic Cloak, which is just the stealth while charged. He has a rule called Power Vacuum. When another unit within 10 inches of this model spikes, you can charge this model. I really think this is a cool rule. And it's another one of those new rules that they've brought out in this Kickstarter where I'm like, okay, where's this going in the future? Right? Like,
Yeah.
because this rule, like, if you put this on a Warjack or something, what? Like, that'd be amazing in the future.
Yeah. I mean, this guy's basically a convergence model.
Well, and what's more is it's really cool because, like, me having to stay charged for my stealth during my turn is not usually great. But if you have something that spikes for an attack within 10 inches and I charge it during your turn, and now I've just made sure that you have no attacks that can get to me because you're not within 8 inches anymore. It actually has some really interesting play with the Mimetic Cloak, which I think we usually poo-poo a little bit. So, I think that's super cool the way that those work and make Mimetic Cloak a more interesting thing. It also helps his Arcantric Amplifier, right? So if he doesn't have Arc on him at the end, like say you summon him out of a gate and whatever you're wanting to hit is more than 12 inches away, they spike, without even thinking about it within 10 inches of him and he gets charged. Well, suddenly they've made it to where that start of the turn Fury that you had ready can hit more targets. So Power Vacuum is actually a super, super cool.
Yeah. Plus, it helps with your arc economy. So, say you're activating something and you want to charge it. Well, if it ends its activation within 10 inches of it, it can spike off and then Leak charges and can go do his thing, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I think he has a lot of really cool utility with that ability. So,
I think there's an argument for taking him, the Keeper, and like Corbus as your heroes, just to give you a little bit more threat with your Furies, which Marchers don't normally have, especially especially in full size, where like typically you only run two Weavers in Marcher Worlds. So having an extra two sources of Furies or Ciphers is really nice.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I think that, and I think he's also just made better for Marcher World because, like I say, their solo roster is so stacked right now. Like,
mhm.
you almost always want two engineers. You almost, like, if you're taking the cadre, you're taking at least one strike team leader. There's an argument if you're taking two, if you want to take two cadres or if you want to just buy another strike team leader to kind of babysit each of your squads. There's the argument for that, bring a two of. And then you're taking at least one of our favorite Outrider model, but there's an argument for two. So like,
I think you take two, and that makes it really tight for Weavers.
right? So it makes it tight for Weavers, and I mean, the fact is, one of those things probably gives so you have one Weaver that's not a hero.
Yeah. No, you have to take one non-hero Weaver for sure.
But I mean, your slots are filling up real quick in that full battle force thing. So I think that the fact that he gets to sit in one of those free slots, in quotation marks, like it's part of your list, but it's like a slot that's, I don't think it's as hotly contested as some other spots. Like I think you take Corbus 100% every time, all the time.
Yes.
And then I think you take him, and then it's flavor to taste.
Yeah.
Just because he's also got more cool rules we haven't even talked about. One of his more interesting rules, in my opinion, is he has a spike for Transabyssal Gate. This unit can spike at the end of its activation to be immediately recalled. So sometimes what you'll have happen in a game is the battle will shift somewhere where you can have models stuck in places that aren't necessarily like important to the battle. And he can kind of just say, hey, you know what? I realize that I'm out of position. Let me just come back, and you don't have to sacrifice your summoning for the. It's a super good ability. I mean, it's not something you'll want to use all the time. If you're using it all the time, consider positioning him better. But situationally, you're going to want to use it, and then you can just bring him out of the gate that you already had set up the same turn. So it's actually a super.
Yeah, it's also a nice little heal if you take damage.
Right.
So.
It's got a lot of cool stuff to it.
Yeah, I really like this piece.
Yeah, he's got a lot of really cool rules that, like, I'm kind of curious where they show up in the future, right? Like, I think heroes in general could have this Transabyssal Gate rule and not be busted for it. But the fact that he's the only one that has it right now is really cool. Then we're going to talk about his weapon, which has a really cool name. It's the Nexus Forge. I don't know why it's range 1, because it's a big old whopping stick. I guess the ISA Weaver stick is 1, and it looked kind of like a weirdly ISA stick in some ways, because it has like those little hex patterns that they have.
We stole it.
We stole it. Actually everybody stole it because he works for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, it's Jax. This model is Jax.
So he's range 1, PAL 5 with that, but it has 2 different spikes on it. So when you do hit something with this model, you can choose to dislocate it, which we know from AC all the time. When this model hits an enemy model with this weapon, after the attack is resolved, this model can spike once to reposition the model hit anywhere within 3 inches of its current location. This is always a good rule. Like, it is always good unless you absolutely need to hold on to your arc to survive. This rule will win you games because it doesn't have a base size restriction, and the larger the base size, the further away they go.
The fact he works for AC scares me a little bit.
I mean, the problem is AC's never taking this guy, right?
I don't know. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do with AC with this guy because of like the Relicon and the Divine Tempest. Because the Divine Tempest can kill something, bring it in. Leech can charge off the Relicon, go do something, and then spike and flee the scene. Like,
I mean, but if you look at the AC hero roster, we're pretty stacked right now, right?
well, I think in I think in primary size, we're going to start seeing at least 4, if not 5 heroes in a roster.
Maybe, yeah, and that's probably fair. Yeah, I think AC is just too stacked right now for this guy to be like your first 3 picks. But if you're taking extra picks, he's probably fine then. And I think AC is also the problem is one of the big draws of this guy is that he's a range 12 weaver that goes up to range 17, and AC does not care about that like at all.
I disagree. So I think AC having more weavers on the board just to cover more space is never a bad thing. Like your whole thing now
it's
is
never
you have
a bad thing. But now we have a squad that's weavers. We have the Divine Tempest that's a weaver.
yeah.
We have our normal weaver. We just got weavers coming. We got a vehicle weaver. Like you got weavers coming out the wazoo in AC right now.
Yeah, which is great because now, like, it's like what I tried to do after Kickstarter 2, where I'd have Enigma and anything else that could be a weaver just to like overwhelm everything. Well, now you have it naturally. Everything's a weaver. So having this guy be able to be a utility piece to help you push that heavy off the board without doing it damage or whatever is massive, I think, because now you can push it like 11 inches or something dumb.
Oh, you can send it. I mean, technically, you could have the Talons dislocate it. You could have him dislocate it. You could Annihilation Vortex it. So if it's like a vehicle, it moved 18 inches, and then it can get slammed another 3.
Yeah, so you can potentially deal with heavies like the Sentinel that has 1,000,000 health or whatever without actually dealing it damage.
You can. The Sentinel is the worst one you could have brought up for this, because the Sentinel, while it's charged, it can't be placed or repositioned or pushed.
Of course it can't. Of course it can't. My
it is
bad.
The only model in the game with that rule.
Why would I assume that they had a weakness? That was my fail of this episode.
They can be pulled.
Oh yeah, woohoo! Everybody, let's celebrate.
I think Dislocator's a really good rule, and I think that different factions will use out of that. Especially since it's not going to cost you anything to charge him, because somebody, especially in skirmish, will probably spike within 10 inches.
Yeah, no, I think he's very good. I think.
Well, let's hear this last rule.
Oh, he has another rule that you can spike for on his weapon. This weapon is just magical. He has Thaumaturgic Initiator. It is the same rule as is on the Paragon Commander in Empyreans. When this model destroys one or more enemy models with an attack with this weapon during its activation, after the attack has been resolved, this unit can spike to use Thaumaturgic Initiator. When it does so, you can immediately play and channel a Fury through this model. So sometimes, it's just going to get you an extra attack or an extra cryo lock or something, and more attack, more better.
Yeah, you're telling me more Furies for AC is a bad thing?
It's one of those things though where it's weird. He gives you a decision tree when you hit something. If it's dicey whether you kill it, because Dislocator's on hit. This is on kill. So if you've got a 1 health left, like Light Warjack, and you really want to do this, but you really need to get him off the point, you're like, oh god. You got a really weird decision tree to do. It's like, do you guarantee you get this point, or do you try and just roll the dice and see if you get the 4 and get to do a Fury afterward?
Yeah, I think it's awesome that it gives you like those options where you can like look at your dice and go, I'm probably going to kill this. I've got a Fury.
Oh yeah, I mean, you beat something by like 4 or something. Like you're probably just feel okay with holding off.
Yeah, and then if you're not sure,
you beat it by 1, you're sweating.
And then if you're not sure about it, you're just like, what's more important, right? Like, do I go for the
greed
scenario?
Is always more important.
Yeah, like, or do I get greedy?
Well, Sneaky 100% every time waits for the Thaumaturgic. You got dice like those.
I mean, I also don't have options because I don't play. I'm not playing this character in Empyreans. Let's be honest.
I mean, I think he's more interesting in Empyreans than some other places, because Empyreans, like Paragon Commander being a 2 DC, makes him hard to deploy, especially when you've got the Metator and all the other 2DC things and 3DC things you want to bring out. So Leech just being able to be that 1DC thing to get you a Weaver, I think is useful. I mean, they already have a super crazy hero Weaver.
Yeah.
But
let's be honest, I'm already bringing 2 Paragon Commanders, so I don't care about that spike.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's fair.
they're both Weavers, and I already have a Hero Weaver, so like I have no reason to take Leech.
I don't know. I think he adds enough that he's a consideration. I don't think he's an auto take by, but
yeah, I think he adds a displace, which is useful. It's definitely useful.
The displace has its place.
You could say that.
So
well,
I'm
he's
trying to get
also
better
one
at
of the
my
weird
dad
ways
jokes.
that he's also one of the weird ways that March or that Empyreans could throw four cipher cards out in a turn.
That's true. That is an option. what
Sounds
what you
gross when
what
you say it out
would
loud.
what you would need to make that happen though is just silly.
Well,
but
I mean, all you have to do
it's
is
an
kill a
option.
squad member with him and the Paragon,
Hmm.
and have 2 Furies in hand,
Yeah, and have 2 Furies in hand.
which
Yeah.
isn't even a huge ask, right?
Mhm.
Especially since this guy, like, if the Paragon Commander or anything else in your list like spikes, he just gets charged. Everything else just charges because they're Empyreans. So having the chance to do this is not inconceivable.
This is true.
I mean, to be fair, you probably just take Tolkien and he automatically lets you do it if you've got something sitting on him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, 4 Furies or 4 Cipher cards in a turn is pretty insane.
It's gross. I mean, you
Sounds
could
gross to say it out loud.
you could cycle through because you get the discard, so you can cycle through your entire hand in a turn.
I do think that this model is super good. I think it's a little sad that I think Marcher World is the faction where you're going to see him 90% of the time. I think other people are going to, grow attached to this model and use him outside of Marcher Worlds. But I think Marcher Worlds is just where you're going to see it. Because the other factions just have so many other things they want to take over him.
Yeah. Well, it offers the most to Marcher Worlds because their Weaver isn't great, and he's a great Weaver. So there's a lot there's a lot of reason to take him in Marcher
And
Worlds.
I don't even think the Marcher World Weaver is bad. I mean, base defense 4 is a thing.
Yeah, for sure.
My Weavers lived through some ungodly things they should not.
Right. Like
They're just not
value
great.
to the Marcher World Weaver. It's just the
for sure.
Moki 10-inch range is rough, and they don't have like him having that power backing role. It adds so much value to him, like that you may not have to charge him at all.
Yeah. Marcher Worlds definitely needs arc economy. It adds arc economy. Their Weavers are good. They're just not good at being Weavers, and this guy is good at being a Weaver. So like it adds a lot. Whereas AC has Weavers out the wazoo. They've got Displace out the wazoo. Empyreans have Weavers out the wazoo. And they've got the other Spike. And ISA also has great Weavers already.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the high end for Fenric Leech activation is you're in Marcher Worlds. You got another Marcher Worlds Weaver out there. He throws out a Fury. He spikes within 10 inches of him. Let's Fenric get charged. But he spikes to keep that Fury, right? So then Fenric goes up, kills something, hits him with the same Fury, and that spikes him. Your other thing that you were able to just charge for free normally goes up, spikes within 10 inches of Leech, and then you get to aggression. So then he gets charged again, and then you get to aggression theorem something, hit again, and it just lets you do another one.
Well, I'm pretty sure, doesn't it say during
it says during activation. Never mind. Dang it. I had like this crazy awesome like Rube Goldberg for just emptying out your cipher hand. But my dreams are dashed.
Apologies.
They do call Sneaky the Dream Killer.
Yeah.
Apparently.
But yeah. I think he's super cool. I think he adds enough to be interesting for most factions, but the problem is I think most other factions just have so many picks over him.
Mm-hmm.
That he's going to be a hard take in most factions besides Marcher Worlds, where I think he's borderline auto take. At least in primary. I think in regular, I think he'd have to be crazy to give up Corvus for him. Or Skirmish. Shouldn't call it skirmish regular. I just play more skirmish than most people, so it's regular for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's really.
I agree.
And I think that recall thing is something that's gonna trip some people up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's super solid. Any more thoughts from you on him, Josh?
No, I basically said my piece. Like, he's going to be an auto include for me for most part. I'm going to use him to bolster the threats from my Furies, because currently, a lot of the time, they are dead cards in my hand, unfortunately. So this is going to give me a little bit more of an angle to attack people from while still doing my normal shenanigans. And that's kind of the theme of Kickstarter 3 for Marcher Worlds, is just accenting what we already do. So I'm 100% taking him. I'm going to try and spice in the Keeper for just maximum Cypher efficiency coming up. So I don't know if it's going to be optimal, but it seems like it's going to be a blast to play, which is all that really matters.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
So Josh, if that's all you have to say on it, unless Sneaky has any last thoughts, you can take us out.
Nope.
Yeah. So I think the theme of Marcher Worlds is just options, options, options. Keep doing what you already did and just flavor it with some awesome pieces. And we look so cool in Kickstarter 3.
I will say, you guys got a glow up on the looks. Like
Yeah. We went from being normal dudes with cloaks and backpacks to now we got a little bit of flair. So I'm pretty excited about that. And on that note, guys, go check out the Kickstarter. It's running for at least another 2 weeks, I think.
No, the 29th is when it ends.
Yeah, at this point, it's like, from recording, it's like 7 days.
Oh yeah,
Is it
I
7
didn't
days?
realize.
I think it's only got, like,
6
4
days. I don't even know what today's date is.
It's the
Today's
25th.
the 25th.
It's 4 days.
Today's the 24th.
Oh,
Hey,
it's
it's
the
12:21 a.m. for me, so it's 4 days.
Oh, well, it's the 25th for you.
Okay. So, point is, 4 to 5 more days of Kickstarter. Go check it out. Pledge your favorite army. Make sure you get those juicy cadres. And on that note, guys, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you guys next time.
Thank you.
And also, Josh has to get this pushed out before the.
Thank you for listening. This podcast is brought to you by Essex War Games. Now, if y'all enjoyed the content, don't forget to subscribe. Now, for more content, you can check out the Through the Void Gate blog, or join us on the Essex War Games Facebook, Discord, and YouTube. Stay safe and roll super strikes.